Hi, everybody. Trying to get out the next video training for you guys on some things that go on in loss prevention. This time, we'd like to talk to you guys about planning for outdoor events. Now, I know that the Country Music Festival is over, but what I'd like to do is give you kind of an insight as to what we went through, what we were planning for, what we were doing, and what we can do for the next event, keeping in mind that we have lots of events throughout the township. So here we go. So what are we going to try to do with this? What we want to show is why is it important to have fire safety at these events? Some of the legal and regulatory frameworks, some risk assessments and planning, fire safety infrastructure and equipment, temporary structures and tents, crowd management and evacuation planning, and things that we need to think about when we're doing stages, performance, and pyrotechnics. Now, at the Country Music Festival, we did fire safety. We took into consideration a lot of the legal and regulatory pre-planning. We definitely did a lot of that. Fire safety and equipment. We had EMS, we had fire, we had brush trucks, we had everything. A lot of tents, temporary structures. We ended up with crowd management and evacuation planning because we ended up with crowds bigger than we thought, but we took that all into consideration when we were doing it. So we were very well prepared for all of it. Stages, did that part, but pyro we did not do. But what we can do is we're going to go into some of the few of the things that we need to do as it relates to pyro. So why is it important to pre-plan and take care of the fire safety? So crowd management, probably none of you guys are old enough to remember the tragedy that happened at the Riverfront Stadium when the Who came into town. They opened up the doors, people were crushed, and several people were killed. So we want to make sure that when we're controlling the crowds, if something goes on, we prevent panic. We also want to make sure that if something comes in, so we took into account severe weather and things like that. So if we have to evacuate, hostile event, severe weather, anything like that, that we can get people out of there in an orderly and safe fashion. Again, we don't want to have any injuries or casualties because we're getting people out of there. No stampeding. And then the other thing that we take into consideration is the fact that these events take in such large open areas. So we did a very good job of that by having people up front, people in the middle, people in the back, and we staged everybody so that we could do the most optimal care for the people. So as far as fire prevention, what do we look for? So temporary tents, structures like that, we want to make sure that they're fire resistant. Easiest way to look is every tent, temporary structure, thing like that, they're going to have a label on the tent somewhere that says that they meet the California standards for safety. That's pretty much the gold standard across the United States. If it can meet the California, it pretty much is accepted everywhere. Proper electrical wiring. What we don't want, we want to make sure that when they bring in these portable generators or they bring in the large portable generators, that they're not using extension cords that are frayed. They are going to use extension cords. It's going to be perfectly acceptable, but we want to make sure that they're using the right gauge wires for what they're powering. So we're not going to use a little home extension cord to power a sound system. I know seems pretty far fetched, but we need to make sure that everything is within the size limits of the wire. Yeah, there's a couple electricians on the fire department, but for the most part, we're not electricians. We're definitely not electrical inspectors. So if you see anything that isn't right or you don't think is right, you get a hold of somebody and we contact the building department, we have an electrical inspector come out. Open flames. That could range anywhere from open flames and cooking, and candles. It could be, the little tiki torches for bugs. So we want to, there are times where you can use things like that, but we have to make sure that they're in the right location. They're far enough away from the tents. So managing pyro. So the Ohio Fire Code has an entire section that deals with pyrotechnics. The easiest way to deal with it is get with your promoter, your vendor, or whoever ahead of time. Make sure, are you using pyro? That could be fireworks, that could be flame effects on the stage, it could be hot pots that are shooting balls in the air, whatever. As long as it is considered a pyrotechnic by the state of Ohio, 1.3, 1.4, it doesn't matter. They need to go through the approval process up front in getting permits. That means we have to review it. We have to make sure that they have their license to be shooting or setting off these pyro in the state of Ohio. So that is really, right now, it only falls upon myself to take a look at this, look at the entire permit, and then Chief Prinz will be the one to sign off. Plus, we also have to get the police department, they have to sign off on it. And if anybody is uncomfortable or does not like it, the permit's off and no pyro. Food vendors and mobile food units. We do a really good job with like the food truck rally. We've collaborated with other fire departments around the county that they can go and do an inspection with Springdale, and they can get a little sticker that says that they've been inspected. They come to us, we accept that sticker as being previously inspected. We just look for a couple minor things afterwards, but we do have to make sure that if they do not have an inspection, that we do it. And the food vendors, the health department's going to come in just like anything. Limited access. So a lot of times when you see these open festival events like the one we had back in August, getting in and out, they try to limit those so that they don't have people inadvertently coming in that shouldn't be there. So they try to put these in a remote location. The problem with doing something like that, because they have enclosed the festival grounds, it's treated like a building. If it was just an outdoor event, no fencing, nobody bothers enclosing these people, you're not really worrying about access or emergency exits or anything like that. But once they put that fence around there, it is treated like a building. You have to have so many, no more travel distance to get to an exit. You have to worry about how big are the access points, how many of them. And you want to make sure that they're clearly invisible to anybody that's inside. We did a great job on this, that if there were any spaces where we tried to take care of if somebody was hurt in a certain location, they didn't have very far to get to an access point where EMS could go ahead and pick them up and take them back to either the treatment or the triage area and get them out of there if we need to. So those are kind of the big things that we look for. Sorry, excuse me. So we also want to look at weather conditions. Westchester is pretty notorious for strong winds and thunderstorms and things like that. But when we're doing sorry, turn that down. But we're looking at extreme heat. We did a great job thinking about extreme heat for, people. Did we have to get into a cooling area? Did we have to get inside the building to get them some liquids, things like that? We put a plan in place for strong winds. We knew what each tent and temporary structure, what their limits were, as far as once we got to certain wind velocities, that they would go ahead and start considering taking the stage down, um, and different things like that. Drought conditions we're worrying about, you know, are the high vegetation and things around the facility, are we worrying about, you know, people smoking, throwing cigarettes down, thunderstorms, what do we do? So they have plans in place to make sure that if there have storms coming in, we're monitoring lightning within a certain area, we're monitoring um, wind speeds and different, um, what's the probability that there's going to be a storm coming through, and if there is, what do we do for evacuating people? Now, what we learned at the Voice of America, there's not really much of a place where um, you can evacuate to. So we made as many arrangements as possible of, you know, the Voice of America centers right there, the churches across the street. And so you try to make arrangements for the patrons of the festival to be able to go somewhere the best you can. Again, temporary structures, we look at all those things. High winds, properly installed. Every time they do a permit for a tent or a temporary structure, they come with installation standards of, you know, how many guy wires, how much weight, different things like that. And inside there, it's going to tell you what the maximum wind speeds are. If you have from here to here, you're supposed to just keep an eye on it. From here to here, you do this, but if it gets to this point, start considering taking the tents down. And then stages would be where you look at outside engineering studies. So they literally, when a stage goes up, you have to have an engineering assessment of the stage, and it'll tell you, you know, has it been properly installed? Was it installed according to the standards? So that falls under the building department, and they come out and they do an inspection to make sure that it meets all that. One of the last things is over here with asset protection. You know, so they got to go home at some point. So what do you do between the time everyone leaves and the time they come back in the morning? So you put plans in place between the security people of the festival and our police, or whoever, just to make sure that the venue itself is being protected. I know that's not a fire code, but that's something to think about. Compliance and regulations. Is there anything else that the township does, or requirements that we have? We have the Ohio Fire Code. We have the NFPA standards. Is there anything in place that the township has adopted? Police, fire, all of this, the months and months and months leading up to a festival the size of the Country Music Festival. All of these things are discussed ahead of time. So at the last minute, there are no surprises. Because what we want to make sure is when we're doing these things, we need to instill in the planning phases of it that the community knows that we've done everything in our power to create the most safe and enjoyable festival that you can. So you want to make sure, and this also goes with our trustees and everybody else, that so when it's all done, they know we're the best at it, and that if another one comes along, fear goes away, that we know what we're doing, and everyone is going to be treated the same way. Make sense? So legal and framework. So these are the few. The Ohio Revised Code requires, by chapter 3737, this is where you see everything about fireworks and exhibitions. 3731 is where the construction of and inspection of buildings, which is where we get our Ohio Fire Code. 3734 is hazardous waste management. What's hazardous waste? Anything from trash on the ground to oils with the grills or what have you. It's that these are the three main sections. You have administrative code, fire code. So when we're looking at it, as far as a festival goes, these are the 6 chapters that we spend a lot of time in. Means of egress, that was probably the biggest thing that we had to worry about. Calculating the number of people, the size of the exits, the location of the exits. 31 is for tents and membrane structures. 33 is fireworks. 50 is hazmat. 61 is combustible fibers, which you start worrying about things like that when you have a festival that's got maybe it's a fall festival and they've got a lot of straw and hay and things like that. 66 is motion pictures and televisions. So it's not that we're really worried about television events, but they do have a lot of audio visual, the big side screens, things like that. You do have to worry about those. What do you do in the event of severe weather? So 66 was where you're going to get all the sections. And this is when you're doing a outdoor event like this, you are literally going line by line through the code to make sure have we covered ourselves on everything, right? Tents, stages, temporary electric, all of that needs permits. They come through us. We take a look at it, and then it goes off to Butler County Building Department where they ultimately issue the permits. So we have a very strong hand in making sure that we're comfortable. If we're comfortable, the building department usually is fairly comfortable. But again, it's a close collaboration between their department and ours. Inspections is where all you guys come in. The Loss Prevention Bureau is going out. We're doing a lot of the pre-inspections as we go. We're getting out there days, if not a week or so in advance as things go up. We'll take a look at it. But as inspectors yourselves, it's an ongoing thing. Something like this is not a one and done, but if we see things, we say something. And if you can't deal with it directly yourself, that's why we put a hierarchy of responsibility in place that eventually it'll get to me, and then it's taken care of. But remember, you guys have the authority to yay or nay just about anything out there. You're inspectors, you're certified by the state, you can enforce anything in the fire code. Records is critical. It's what you don't want to do is deal with something, and you just tell them verbally, and then something happens down the road where somebody gets hurt. So, this is it's real important. We keep records of all of our food trucks. We keep records of our inspections, everything. So down the road, you don't get caught with, somebody said something or something happens. You want to be able to show somebody that, yes, we did this. Yes, we took care of this. Yes, it was on our mind. Fire protection systems. You're not going to see much in the way of alarms, sprinklers, but you will see hoods in the mobile food units. Tents, membrane structures, they all have to have fire extinguishers. So you want to take a look at what type of fire extinguishers are required. If they're cooking with vegetable oils or greases, things like that. Sorry. You want to make sure that they have a K class, that they have an ABC, that they need a water can. Every one of them needs to be evaluated for what they're doing. So tents, membrane structures, things like that, all have to have them. If they have sidewalls on the tents, I know this has nothing to do with this part, but you got to start taking a look to see, do you need exit signs and emergency lighting in a tent? If they have sidewalls, yes. If they don't, no. But fire extinguishers in all of them. Now, the little individual 10 by 10 pop-up tents and things like that, not required to have them. For the rule within the fire code, if it needs a permit, it's going to need a fire extinguisher as well. So that magic number is about 400 square feet. If you have a extinguisher or a tent that is roughly that size, start looking at putting fire extinguishers. Or as the inspector, if you don't feel comfortable with it, tell them to put one in. We can always go above for safety's sake. So crowd management, legal. The crowd management requirements in the fire code says that if you have a crowd of 1,000 or more people, then you have to have a crowd manager for one for every 250 people. So this is a class, it's a certification that we will put on the event organizers. So Lori's Roadhouse, when they were putting it together, we based it on 20,000 people. So that's over 1,000. So we had to have one for every 250 people. So it worked out to be about 80 crowd managers. And all they're doing is keeping an eye on the occupancy, making sure that the crowd's not getting out of control, exit signs, emergency communications. The emergency communications is things that are broadcast over the PA system at this stage. We get severe weather coming in, shelter, take, find a safe place, or, whatever, any kind of emergency message that we need to get out to the patrons of the event. The crowd managers are responsible for making sure that's taken care of. Now, we'll approve the messages, but yeah, they ultimately run that. Pyro, we're making sure that they get the permits, distances. So, you can have the close proximity fireworks. You can have the big loud boom boom fireworks. Are they storing it? So we're taking a look at all that. Anytime we have a pyro or some sort of firework, we're going to have a fire inspector that has been trained in pyrotechnics and pyrotechnic safety, that's been to a recognized class. They are going to be there from beginning to end with the fireworks, and they're going to take care of a lot of this. What do we do to make sure that things are being enforced? We're going to go over that with them during the planning events. How do we make sure, the promoter or the people that were in charge of the festival, we work out well within advance. Hey, if we see something, we're going to make them do this. They don't do it, we're going to go ahead and maybe ask them to shut down, which would be a last resort for us. But if we're having problems, we usually go to the promoter and say, hey, we're having a problem with this vendor. You need to go over and talk to them. Violation penalties, and like I said, ultimately we can ask them to shut down or leave the property or things like that. Those are all within our authority we can do. But like I said, our job is not there to. Penalties should be the very, very absolute last thing that you're thinking of, because it doesn't do any good to go in there with that kind of an attitude. We want to ensure compliance, not penalties. And if we need to, we work with other agencies, building department, the health department, whoever could have a hand in the other parts of enforcement. Assessment, risk assessment. We're not going to go over all this because you guys, it's a lot of information. So we get upfront, why are we doing an assessment? We want to make sure everybody's safe. We want to know what all the hazards are. How are we going to mitigate any of the problems if we find them? you need to know when the event is, how long is it going to be, and then we worked from the beginning. They expected around 20,000 people, and I think they got it. So all of the stuff that we're working with, it's all, a lot of it is based around size. How many EMS people we have, how many fire people we have, how many inspectors. Um, we need to start planning for if there's pyro, food units. What are we going to do about inspecting those, taking care of them? Um, Fire hazards. We're going to know up front, is there a place where they're putting all the food units? Or is cooking going to be sporadic throughout? Is it a cold event and they're going to have outdoor kerosene heaters, electrical tents, flammable materials? Now, you don't really think about that, but all these generators have fuel. So are they bringing in fuel cans to fill up their generators when they're going low? And then what do we do for vehicles? If we bring in a diesel tank, if you would, like we did at the festival, music festival, we had a couple 100-gallon fuel tank that we took back and forth and filled up as needed. Where are we going to store that? Right in the middle? Or are we going to, are we going to seclude it? Or are we going to secure it? So you want to keep an eye on those. Risks. Is it a small or a large likelihood? So every contingency that you could think of. That's why we have so many people involved, from police, from fire, the developer or the promoters. Everybody's throwing out every possible thing that you could think of. Let's see what we can do about planning for this. How are we going to mitigate them? So, are they going to have fire protection systems? Are we going to force them to use hood suppression system? So once you know what the risk is, what are you going to do about mitigating a problem once you identify the risk? So you have to have things in place. So if you have, make it simple. So you have a person that is deep frying French fries. So we need to think ahead. If that grill catches fire, that deep fryer catches fire, in a commercial building, we know it's got a hood system. What do we do in an open festival? Oh, we make sure that they have a fire extinguisher and they have the proper type. So you try to play the what ifs throughout the entire planning phase. Every contingency you can think of, we'll do the best we can to come up with them all. An emergency response planning. Chief Hannafin did a great job in working out just about every contingency that we can think of. If we had to evacuate, if we had to come up with assembly points, communication system, we coordinated with every possible agency that there was out there. EMA, sheriff, police department, fire department, other fire departments, hospitals. We're thinking of every what if that we can. So all of this goes into the planning. Collaboration and communication. I think we had a very good with ours. We had radio channels that we were using. We set all of our radios up with earpieces so that we could hear, because it was a loud event. Having you guys there was a critical part. You may have been assigned to a fire truck, but you're also a fire inspector. Everybody sees something, say something. It doesn't look right, you deal with it or get somebody there that can. Communicate everything that you need to, and somebody's going to take care of it. Like I said before, documentation. Treat these things no different than an EMS run. It's imperative that you do this thoroughly, accurately, So that not only can it be understood for what you're doing now, but for the future. Because if somebody tries to sue you 3 years from now, will you remember what happened at that event? So, just like we say in EMS, it's a high likelihood that somebody's going to raise a stink about something. So why not protect yourself? Um, Continuous monitoring. We did that throughout the event. We had somebody on one of the gators, and they were driving through, and they were checking out, looking at crowd sizes, and um, dealing with exits. Are they being blocked? So throughout the event, once it gets going, you got to keep your head on a swivel. You got to make sure that you're doing everything. You got to make sure that you're watching everything, because you can't just do it up front at the very beginning and then forget about it, because the upfront might be the big part, but throughout the rest of the day, throughout to the end of the event, at the end of the day, there's still, as far as like the music festival, there's still 20,000 people there. Somebody's got to keep an eye on it. Like I said, fire protection system, probably the biggest thing you're going to have is a fire extinguisher. But you need to take a look at the chapter 9 in the fire code. Does it require a special protection system? That's where we're going to do it up front, but keep an eye on it. These are things that we take into account in the development part of it. Temporary electric, we talked about that. When in doubt, you call the building department and get an electrical inspector. Fire lanes and access road. We dealt with that at the music festival, where we had a very nice clear path along the outside. All of a sudden they put porta johns and a fence in the way. So what do we have to do? Open it up, because we still need to be able to get gators, brush truck, whatever. We need to be able to protect this place. So without, no different than around a commercial building, if fire lanes aren't being maintained, then we make it maintained. Emergency lighting and exit signs. You're really not going to have that in an outdoor event, but the tents will. And so the difference between the tents and a membrane structure, when do they do and don't need these? Simple rule. If it's got sidewalls, it needs exit signs and emergency lighting. They make special ones that are battery operated. Just about every tent installer, vendor, they know this, and they bring them and they install them no matter what. Water supply and fire hydrants. Can you get to a fire hydrant? Can you get to up at VOA? You get what is it, something like 40,000 gallon water tank that's underneath the ground up by the building. We want to make sure that we don't have vendors or tents or trucks or whatever blocking it. So we still need to get our trucks in there if something bad happens. Making sure things are in the right location. And we've talked about compliance inspections already, but I'd say 80% of the compliance inspections are done before the first sound even gets played at our music festival. We're going to make sure that everything is good before they ever open up. Regulations, when do they need inspected? The way Westchester does it, we look at everything, every tent, every canopy, every electric box, every tent, every stage. We look at them all, just so that we have the comfort of knowing that it's all safe. Permitting and review, we get permit reviews on the site plan, types of structures, flame ratings for tents. All of that comes to us. We review it, we approve it, or we ask them to make changes. And then we submit it to Butler County Building Department for the majority of the permits that they're going to have. Now we want to take a look at exits, means of egress. Again, probably the biggest thing, and so that you guys understand when we're looking at exits, um, it's very specific on how big and how many. So you want to make sure that the number of are in a location where they can easily access and easily travel to it. But how big do they have to be? It's real simple. 20,000 people, multiply that by 0.2, and that tells you how many feet of uh, total opening. So in the case of the music festival, it came out to be something like, I can't remember the number off the top of my head, but it was somewhere around 330 some feet of open exit space. So because we had to have multiple of them, say it was, um, 330 divided 11-foot wide opening, that would make them have to have 33 exits. So if they had a 40-foot, you just need to make sure that however big the exits are, add the opening space of every one of them, and make sure that you have 0.2 inches, um, 0.2 times the number of people, and that'll tell you um, if you're in the right ballpark. Electrical safety, again, we're not electrical inspectors. Only a couple of you guys are electricians. So, if we have to worry about electrical, call one of the guys on the fire department and say, hey, does this look right? Doesn't look right. You need to get an electrical inspector out there because they have to approve it. And then this is inspection and compliance. This is your role. Loss prevention is going to go out there and do a majority of it, but you as an inspector also have responsibility and a requirement that you should be keeping an eye out for things. If you see it, say something directly to the vendor, directly to whoever. And if you're not getting compliance, make sure that you have make sure that you have, if you can't get them to do it, make sure you say something to the loss prevention. We'll take care of it. Crowd dynamics, maximum occupancy, egress routes. Again, we've touched on this before. This is really going to be done way up in the very beginning, and making sure, how do we get people in? How do we get them out? How do we get them out safely? How do we get them out in a neat, orderly fashion so that people don't get trampled? Because think about the shooter in Las Vegas. He sat up in that hotel room and started shooting at people. Well, if something like that happens, how do you get people out of there? Can you corral everybody to a safe place by getting them out of the way? And how do you do that? So pre-planning, pre-thinking the whole event out, those are critical in doing stuff up front. Occupancy, so we took a look at that up front, making sure, and we basically calculate the maximum occupancy at an event like this, no different than a building. Remember I said earlier, put a fence around this property, now they're enclosed, treat it like a building. Egress routes, do we have enough? Are they in the right location? If you noticed at the music festival, we had exits that they had zip tied. Through enforcing fire codes that you can't have certain kind of locks on an egress door. You can't lock an egress door. You can't have special knowledge to open up. So that's pretty much what these zip ties were. We had them go out and find zip ties that had a breakaway strength of about 8 pounds, which falls within the exit door opening requirement established in the fire code. You can just push that gate and the gate will open up. So it doesn't take special knowledge. It's automatic. It'll break away. Okay. Signage, communications, crowd control. All of this goes up front in thinking and planning. Communications, we work with the promoter to have messages pre-taped, pre-recorded, ready to go so that it handles any kind of event. There's a active shooter in the, do this. There's severe weather coming, do this. Lightning's been seen in the area, do this. And all of those messages go through us for approval. Crowd control, again, do we have barriers in the way that they're going to have to get through? Is there snow fencing? Is there whatever? If there's anything that gets in the way of a crowd getting in or out of the property, we need to be thinking about that and approving it. Special needs and accessibility, they did a great job on this. They had special needs areas for handicap and wheelchair. But what do you do in the event of something goes on? How are you going to get those people out? Work with the promoter. What's the best way? And this one did a really good job that the one wheelchair accessible area was elevated. It was close to an exit, so all they had to do is go straight out. So these are the things that we're thinking about because when people are leaving, a wheelchair isn't moving as fast as somebody running. So you have to take in the difference in exit speeds in getting them out. Training and drills, again, crowd manager. Large events like this, we're telling the promoter, this is the training that we will accept. This is the training that we want you to have all your people do. Stage construction, fire resistance. Again, we talked about this. Curtains, drapes, decorations. Is there flowers? Is there trees? Is there pyrotechnics? Is there stage? Is there what's the stage made of? Is there we're taking into account all these different things and making sure that they meet all the flame ratings, make sure that the construction. I think we beat up electrical and pyro hard enough, but stages are different. They take a lot more effort, and they take an actual engineer to draw it up, stamp it, certify that it's been designed correctly, and that it's going to meet all of the collapse, winds, severe weather, everything like that. Some point along here, if you guys were sitting in front of me, we would be asking questions, but this is a lot of information, and you might think that you don't have a whole lot to do with, but you guys are probably just as critical to all of this information as myself and the three inspectors, because you guys are intimately involved in walking around these festivals. So you guys are probably as critical, if not more, for making sure that we make this the safest possible event that we can put on. Safety clearances, crowd separation, fire watch. Fire watch is interesting in that at any time you don't think something is, if you feel like an inspector needs to be standing there the whole time, then we'll have probably known about that up front. Like if we think that there's going to be pyro on the stage and we think that we need to have an inspector up on the stage with a fire extinguisher in his hand, making sure that if something goes wrong, he's right there. we can do that. If we need to go to the next level, and have a fire truck there with a hose line, that's pretty extreme. But if we think that having one of ours or two or three of our people that are trained to deal with these situations, we can require that they put them there. Emergency response procedures. You guys get all of the planning information up front. Chief Hannafin is really good about sending out all the ICS forms to make sure that everybody knows what's going on every particular day. The procedures are shared with both us and the staff. Everybody should know what the festival is doing and what we plan for. Compliance inspections, updates, changes. It's your responsibility, just like doing this training, stay current on the codes. I know that you guys don't do them on a day-to-day basis, but with trainings and little snippets of information that I'll send out or have sent out or will be sending out, this is your opportunity to stay current on changes. Just like this is on a different subject, but next year the State Fire Marshal is looking to come out with the 2024 Ohio Fire Code, which is going to be massively different than what you're used to. So we're going to be training to make sure that everybody's current. So I know that was a lot of information. I know that we may have gone through it very quickly, but biggest thing that everybody needs to take from this is that it is a large, time-consuming effort on everybody's part to plan, make sure that these concerts, make sure these events, make sure these venues are as safe as possible. Start early. We started with the music festival probably a year in advance, and it went right up to the day that it was over, because planning doesn't stop the minute it starts. It stops when they're done. Stay vigilant, stay observant, make sure you document, and just remember that safety is everyone's responsibilities. Now, they may not see you, but because you are as good as you are, people don't have to think about safety as much, because that's what you're there for. You may not be seen, but you are critical to making sure that these are the safest events at all. So if you have any questions, go ahead and send them to me. Go ahead and fire away, ask questions, whatever. I'm here to help you. Let me know what I can do. And if there's anything else I can do, you let me know, and I'll be here to take care of you. Thank you.